Let's talk about wokeness. There's a major conversation happening in academia and in social media and in corporate spaces about wokeness. Really what the idea of wokeness is really critical race theory. Critical race theory is the idea that history has basically been told from a white Anglo-Saxon and a white and a European lens. There's been an overemphasis on whiteness, on white maleness, and on the history of European and white cultures, but not so much on black culture or the culture of people of color or the history of black people. So the idea behind critical race theory is to give black people a framework to understand their place in history, and also to help educate white academics that there's a history outside of what they've been taught. And that's created a lot of pushback. We saw that with Nicole Hannah-Jones being denied tenure because of the 1619 Project. Well, they didn't say it was because of the 1619 Project, but it was because of the 1619 Project. We've seen state legislatures passing legislation saying that you can't talk about critical race theory in the classroom. You have to ask yourself, why is that? I think it's because American history and American society has largely been founded on the idea that you have to have an erasure of black achievement, or you have to have a downgrading and a disrespect of black achievement and black history to give people something to stand on and something to believe in this country. And unfortunately, a lot of white people have bought into this, and a lot of black people have bought into this, although that's starting to change. At the core of what the issue is with wokeness is this idea that if you show people their history, and you show people their strength, and you show people what they're capable of, and you give that to them with data and you give them to them with facts, you can no longer hold them down and you can no longer make them fearful. Now, the second part of it is this. Under this umbrella of wokeness, we've seen a lot of gibberish, and we've also seen a lot of junk science and junk theory get a lot of credence under the idea of wokeness. Look no further than what happened with activism over the past 5 years. Modern activism started because of the deaths of black males and to a smaller extent black women at the hands of law enforcement. That's what got people in working class neighborhoods and black neighborhoods and neighborhoods around the country out onto the streets to protest and to push back against white supremacy and against over-policing and police violence. The visible deaths that we've seen on camera, on cell phone videos, that's what got people out onto the streets. That's what got people upset. That's what people were pushing back against. What happened in the midst of all that energy, what happened with all that grassroots energy was that people who weren't connected to the grassroots, weren't really connected to the issues that drove people out into the streets, came into these cities where these uprisings happened, and they diverted the energy of the people on the streets into academic theory, and into gender theory, and into feminism, into sexuality. All of these things were actually represented by the people who were on the streets, but they weren't the focus of why people were out there. So the job of the people who were able to try to create wokeness and make a business out of it was to take those issues, which were fringe issues to the black community, and make them the centerpiece of everything. So now what you're dealing with is sort of a catch-all where any kind of academic gibberish and any kind of social gibberish becomes the forefront of a movement outside of trying to push for real change that's going to affect black people in general. So what you got right now is the idea of wokeness, and you've got pushback from both sides on that. You've got pushback on it from the academic field, from the right wing of people who don't want to have any kind of conversation about black history at all. And you also have pushback from progressives and people in the grassroots who realize that the reasons that they created all this energy to push back against over-policing and to push back against white supremacy got co-opted. So it's going to be an interesting time to see how this all plays out. Everything's kind of still up in the air right now, but I think it's good that these conversations are happening. They're necessary. What's good, everybody? Thank you for watching. If you like what I'm doing, subscribe to the channel. Also, if you feel like you can, show some love. Show some love by the Cash App, the Patreon, and the PayPal. That way I don't have to go out here and do the electric slide.